Well, hi, everybody. It is great to be with you all if you're with us live or lots of people listen on recording. So if you listen to this on recording, we love you just as much. We're going to be talking today about all things inclusion. And I'm really excited about the conversation today and the questions that we have for our special guests. And I'm going to let them each introduce themselves and then we'll dive into it. And if you're here live and you have a question you want to throw into the chat, feel free to do that. Or you can take yourself off mute and ask the question live, but sometimes that stresses people out. So you could also feel free to write in the chat. So I'm just going to start sort of in order of who is on my screen. And I'm going to start with you, Chris, if you would introduce yourself and tell us a little about you. And
Yeah, let's see. Uh, I'm a dad to two sons. Uh, what else? In aging services for about 20 years, 14 in one organization in Pennsylvania, 3 years in another organization in Pennsylvania. And the last three has just been a kind of a solo act. But I don't know, Denise, it's been a year since we've been hanging out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so also consulting, and Kirsten, is great to see you because we talk from Leading Age. Brianna, yeah, I see your name on emails and stuff, so it's really great to see you as well. Yeah, and I'm excited for this conversation. So besides just the leadership and the team member engagement, I've actually been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion longer than I've been in healthcare.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm especially pleased to be hanging out today with such an esteemed panel.
Well, I can't wait to get your insights, and I appreciate you being here, Chris. And Chris always brings the energy. We always hear from clients back after Chris has worked with them just how much they've learned and how much fun it was to do the learning with you because of your level of excitement that you bring to it. So thank you for being here. And Brianna, you're next up on my screen.
All right. Hi, I'm Brianna Moss. I'm from Leading Age. It's great to be here and part of this conversation. I've been in the field of aging services pretty much since I started my career. I got a degree in gerontology, and then from there, my first job was in affordable housing for an older adult apartment building. So now I work at Leading Age, and I am on our knowledge and learning team. Primarily, I work on leadership development programming, and I also manage our workforce retention, recruitment, and culture track and diversity, equity, and inclusion track for the annual meeting. I also serve on our DEI council within Leading Age, which Kirsten and another colleague of ours, Mia, heads up.
Oh,
So happy to be here.
thank you. I don't very often hear people who have a degree in gerontology. I have one as well. Do you get when people ask you what's your degree, gerontology, and they start telling you about the rash they have on their arm? You get that? I get people with
I have gotten that.
because they think it's dermatology. I'm like,
Right. They're like, what is that?
awesome. Thanks for being here. And Kirsten, it is so good to see your beautiful face.
Likewise, likewise. It's such a treat to be with you all today. My name is Kirsten Jacobs, and I get to work with Brianna at Leading Age on the same team, the Knowledge and Learning team. I've also been in the field for about 20 years. I also have two sons. I started in the field in assisted living and memory care and retirement communities and different management roles, and then made my way to Leading Age. I've been at Leading Age for 15 years and spend the bulk of my time working on holistic well-being, dementia, DEI, and ageism. And I always say that I see this work sort of in the overlapping space, always centering the individual. So there's lots of points of connection between all of those. But it's really lovely to be with you all.
Oh, that's so interesting. I can't wait to hear more about that too. It is good to be with you. So, we will have a casual conversation. As I said, you're welcome to drop questions in the chat or take yourself off mute to ask more questions. But let's start with just how would each of you define inclusion? When you think about inclusion, how do you define it in your own words? And
Mm.
Kirsten, you're on my screen right now. So, oh no, Chris, you're about to say something. So you just popped up.
Oh, yeah. So on Zoom, just because you say like, right, the outline comes up. So there you go. Inclusion, kind of just top of head. Uh, it is not having to hesitate when you're in your car in the parking lot because you can't wait to get into work,
Mm.
right? So all of the feelings that come up that I belong here, not just because I think it's part of my mission or what I'm doing right now, but because there is confirmation. You have heard it not just from the residents, but you've heard it from the person that you report to, you hear it from your colleagues and team members, and that they kind of take you as you are
Mm.
and let you know that in any number of different ways. I mean, that's yeah, that's on Sunday nights, honey, I love you, but I can't wait to go to work.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's that kind of excitement and that kind of embrace and that kind of cherish. That's what I think of.
I love that. What a beautiful way to say it. And Kirsten, how about you?
Yeah, I think really just said with less beautiful words, but this idea that everyone is invited and then has an opportunity to be who they are and feel that sense of belonging when they are who they are, instead of having to hide pieces of ourselves like so often happens.
Wow. That sense of hiding pieces of yourself. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting when you think about a definition, right? It's like the definition, and then then this, so sometimes the opposite of it makes it even clearer what that definition is. Yeah. How about you, Brianna? How would you describe it?
Very similar, I think, to both Chris and Kirsten. Um, to me, it feels like, a space that's created where I feel fully myself. I don't have to censor my words or my actions. I feel like I truly belong in that space. And that's when I feel like I'm truly included.
Mm, yeah, yeah. So there was part of the teaching that I did this month for inclusion. There was a quote in there, you probably know who said it, but I don't remember, about, it's not just being invited to the dance, it's, getting on the dance floor.
Mhm.
And I loved that definition, and it kind of makes me think of what you're saying, Brianna. It's not just, you can share, but also you're welcome to share in the way that is important to you and that presents you, authentically showing up yourself. Yeah. Give me an example when you've witnessed, in the spirit kind of looking at the opposite sometimes to see what we need. Give a sense of when you've experienced a lack of inclusion in the workplace. It might have been something that you experienced personally. It might be a story that you know of someone, but give an example of when there's been a witnessed a lack of inclusion.
I think in some ways this is just an add to what I was saying in terms of the definition, but I think we all know of people that have had the experience of hiding a piece of themselves because they didn't feel safe in the environment where they were working. And there are some traits that we carry that we can hide and some traits we can't hide. So organizations at which, and not, I think we don't need to be specific, or we could be specific, because we all have heard these stories at which people don't feel like they can be their full selves, and hence have to hide pieces of themselves. So not being able to invite, if I'm a man, not being able to invite my husband to a party, a work gathering. What are the pieces of ourselves that people aren't sharing in the workplace?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's so hard for us, if we're not in that person's shoes, to kind of understand some of that. I took my son and his boyfriend last year on a trip, with actually a NAB trip. We had a meeting in Dominican Republic. And he said to me, I looked at, first of all, the fact that he had to look it up made me want to cry. But he said, I looked up, whatever, Googled about being gay in the Dominican Republic, and that technically it's like illegal or whatever the word is. And he said, will I be okay at the resort with Daniel? And, it didn't even dawn. He's my own son, but that didn't even dawn on me to Google that, to say to him, in some supportive way, or, after he said it to me, certainly, but, how hard that is sometimes to even understand that, what people are dealing with. Brianna, thoughts on that sense of when you've witnessed lack of inclusion at work yourself, stories of somebody else?
I think an example that I've seen is maybe someone is invited to take part in a meeting, but they're not given the chance to actually share their perspective or an idea that they have. So it's kind of like, they want you in the room because you're a diverse perspective, but then you're not included in the conversation. And that's something that I've seen at previous jobs.
Yeah. Come to the table, but don't speak at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, Brianna, I can kind of amplify some of that, or add to that, is that even during when culture change was sweeping senior services, and you had your daily pleasures committees, and I'm just thinking about all the new stuff that came as a result of actually creating a home for the residents and moving away from facility talk versus home, so that the meetings were inclusive of individuals. And there were several occasions where, folk that had never been part of the leadership culture, and sometimes the way that people talk over each other, or there's a topic that new folk have no history with, and they're looking around like, this is what leadership is about, right? There was no orientation, no, hey, here's your welcome packet here, let's go to lunch a couple times so you're prepared for that meeting. And the different kind of the different trappings of that culture, that's what I think about as well. Dismissed, or possibly opinions not taken as seriously, whether that's gender roles, whatever that is, whether that's degree, whether that is seniority. There's so many places where even before the official diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, before we all were thinking more about it, that kind of inclusion has just been part of what it is that we do, at least in the 20 years that I've been around aging services. It's making not just accommodation, but that welcome. It really is. I think sometimes the difficulty is there's so much time in thinking about other and all the scariness that other is, rather than the baseline that everybody needs to feel valued and appreciated. So what do those words sound like? What do those overtures look like to make sure that everybody in fact does feel valued and appreciated?
Yeah. So you're setting up us perfectly to think about that. What does that look like? What are some best practices for inclusion? One of the things I think about, and you mentioned sort of the culture change world that we've been in for decades now. One would argue with not much change, but that's a story for another day. But I think about the introduction of, for example, learning circles, where one person speaks at a time, sort of like we're doing here, like we're supportive of each other, listening, giving each other verbal, really interested in what each other have to say, but nobody's interrupting and jumping in over any one of us as we have that conversation. But the learning circle, where there's a question or whatever statement made and people get to give their opinion one by one, no other crosstalk, and you could pass if you want. And then at the end, after everyone's gone, you go back to the people that pass to see if they anything else to add. And then the conversation happens, because it levels the playing field. To your point, sometimes we invite people to committees and they've never even been to a meeting before. They've only been in a staff meeting where they're receiving information. And so it's like nothing for us to go to a committee meeting, but for somebody who's never attended a meeting, to your point, Chris, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. And by the way, because nobody's covering for me in, dining services, when I get back there, everyone's gonna be yelling at me for sitting in a meeting for a half an hour doing nothing, while they're covering my work, right? So anyway, that to me helped a lot. As someone who talks a lot, is that learning circle, using that with my team. And I'm curious what you all have seen best practices for when it comes to inclusion.
Kirsten, just thinking about our conversations and the wellness, just the wellness piece. So where's the organization that, we at least from my perspective, we've spent so much time talking about, the 7 dimensions of wellness for the residents, and with all of the marketing materials, and the wood shop is involved, and you got the choir, and you have the religious religious clubs, and everything else that meet the need of the residents. I've yet to find as much energy placed on bringing peace to the team members. And it's not just team members, but it's leaders, right? So if we're all under, this unprecedented, uncharted, uncertain stress, just unwinding that would be useful for everything. Because as I am squeezed and workforce crisis and quiet quitting and all the rest of it, the last thing I think about is allowing different voices from the floor, rather than command and control, rather than being terse and kind of directorial, which is just the opposite of a lot of what we say we want to accomplish by helping everybody to feel included. These are certainly interesting times.
So it's really, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was thinking just in terms of the opposite, best practices in taking that moment to breathe, right? So, work-life balance, we all need work-life balance. Now, would you work a triple, right? I mean, it's really hard to come to terms with an us when right now the work feels very, oh my gosh, I'm alone in all this stress and all this anxiety.
Yeah. And the more sort of stressed we are, the more we speed up. And to your point, the less time do I feel like I have to invite diverse opinions. And, it's just get through the day, make the decision quick to get on to the next quick decision that needs to be made, which in turn just creates, I'm reminded of my Leading Age Leadership Academy in this sense of that cycle, right? You don't get the input, you make worse decisions. Because you make worse decisions, you've got more chaos. Because you've got more chaos, you don't have time for input, and you kind of wind up in this big, how I can't even tell you. I was the second year. So how many years ago was that? 12 years ago?
Oh.
Yeah, a long time ago. And that sticks with me all the time, that sense of, where do you break the cycle? And it's that slowdown that you're talking about, Chris, and how important that is. Kirsten and Brianna, thoughts on sort of what might help with some of this?
I think the example that I gave, and I think Denise, you're doing this actually right now, just making sure that you invite people if they have something to say, or, they might and just might not be saying it until you say, Denise, do you have, anything that you want to add? I think that's a way to open it up instead of just thinking that no one has anything to say. or if someone maybe tried to speak to Chris's point and, there's just a lot of talking over each other going on, going back to that person and saying, I think you were trying to say something, and, just being intentional about it.
Oh, I love that. Really calling it out. Sometimes even facilitating groups, I have to say that. I'm like, okay, wait, I got you. But first, Brianna was telling us something, and doing that for people. I love that sense too of asking, and it could be in a committee, it could be in a meeting, but it could also be just outside of that, like one-on-one conversations. And a lot of times people will say to me, I have an open door. And I say, congratulations. That is like the laziest form of leadership that you could possibly have, right? Now, that doesn't mean close your door. I don't want to hear from people, but that is, you are waiting people to come to you. And for you to be able to go to people and say, hey, Brianna, I'd love your thoughts on this or your opinion on this, even if it's not a quote unquote formal meeting. And in some ways that might even be better for, somebody it's tougher to get out of their job or might feel uncomfortable coming to a certain kind of meeting with a group of people. They might be best one-on-one, but that's some of knowing your people. Yeah.
I think Denise is also knowing ourselves, though, right? In actually recognizing that, oh crap, I'm the one with the open door policy, but nobody comes through.
Yes.
And recognizing, oh wait, nobody comes through. Let me figure out, let me take it to the folk.
Yeah.
As well. So do interrupters notice that they interrupt? I'm just thinking about that self-awareness is absolutely critical. So as we think about best practices, I wonder what kind of education is actually occurring in the organizations that actually do bring awareness to the actual culture and how to do things different to break that cycle. So at least, I don't know every system, but I'm thinking about Silverchair and Relias and all this stuff, huh? Like all of what we're talking about is experiential.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, I'm gonna go out on record. I'm standing on this. I think it's impossible to do emotional intelligence by way of any computer.
Yeah.
Right? It's holy crap, I wasn't my best today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'll be better. And that's my commitment, right? And then doing different on that day.
Yeah.
But that's, education. I would love for more organizations to be learning organizations.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
That constant growth. Part of what we have, for example, for this month is in Fully Staffed is every day there's a 10-minute or less task to put into practice the things that you learn. So a conversation with somebody, like one of the tasks this month was speak to 3 people today to get their opinion, 3 people you wouldn't normally, to get their opinion about whatever change or topic you have. But we literally make it 10 minutes or less. So it feels very doable. And sometimes when we think about how do you create a sense of belonging, or how do you work on culture, or how do you work on retention? I mean, it's like these huge topics, like where do you have somebody throw a pizza party, please? Because it's, it's easy. But it doesn't really get to the heart of it. So which is why, like I said, these 10-minute things we've just thought, like, if you can commit to 10 minutes and practicing, to your point, Chris, the experiential learning, having those conversations with somebody, me saying to Chris, you know what, I interrupt all the time. Will you please help me when I do? Tell me when I do it, hold me accountable for, as a partner. Not that you're writing me up, but as a partner, this is what I'm working on. Help me. But to your point, it takes a special leader to want to do some of that.
Yeah. I think even during stand-up, because I'm thinking about like those folks that are currently on, hey Ellen, hey Sandy, that are currently on, hey Lisa. Even if I'm not the one that is running that meeting, the folks that are going to check this out by way of recording, just because everybody has stand-up. So that's a meeting that occurs daily without planning any long thing or an initiative or, a movement or all of this other kind of stuff. anybody can ask a question during stand-up. Anybody can bring a point up at stand-up. Anybody can, here is a quote, made me think about it. Hey, let's hang out for this, hang out with this for the day. That's something that already exists. So what do stand-ups need to look like or sound like or feel like that speak to belonging, that speak to inclusion, that speak to all of the aspirations that we have, but broken down into smaller bites.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that sense of something we're already doing. It's not we're not doing a committee of inclusion. We're not doing right. It's how we do everything, which is what culture is, right? How we do everything in the organization. Chris, makes me think too that, one of the things we do at Drive and we suggest to our clients is starting each meeting with a positive. So everybody shares a positive thing that happened to them. And it's, 10 seconds, 30 seconds long. It doesn't take forever. But by doing that, every person shares. And I even notice when I do even Zooms, like I say, get by the chat and tell me where you're from or whatever. But if people start answering in the chat a simple question, like where are you from? Then they're more apt to share. So if we can do a thing like share positive, home or work, it could be your kid got a 90 on their spelling test, right? Or your son won his baseball game last night. It doesn't have to be work related, but just that simple sharing and the expectation that, first of all, they're focusing on the positive, which is always good, but it also gets me a little bit used to sharing in that group. Yeah. Brianna or Kirsten, thoughts on some of those best practices?
Yeah, one other thing that comes to mind is, and Chris already mentioned our commitment, and Denise, your point about we can argue about how much has happened, but to culture change. From that, we do know deep down the importance of really knowing the person, truly knowing, and that goes to team members as well. So one best practice is to start knowing your team members, who they really are, and whether that's using a survey, using one-on-one conversations, focus groups, maybe all of these things, but then to disaggregate the data. So I need to understand by race, by gender, by all of these identity groups, what the experience is of working within my organization, because I may come out great. I may be at 80%. But do you know what the women of color are feeling within your organization? Do you know what the lived experience of queer team members is within the organization? So if we can understand more deeply what the experience or the feeling of inclusion is within the organization, then we can start figuring out, to Chris's point, what are the pieces of education that we need to be doing? What are the shifts we need to be doing? And maybe they're in places that we don't expect. Maybe not.
Kirsten, a follow-up question for that. One of the things that we struggle with is the more questions we ask, the less people, you know where I'm going with this, the less people want to answer. Yeah. And so what are your thoughts about it? And maybe it's some of the sample size. If I can get lost in an organization of, 3,000 people, it's a little different than if I'm surveying 100 people. But
it's certainly tricky. I do think one idea, and I'd be curious, I'm sure there are so many others, is using pulse checks. So using something that's quicker and smaller. So you're getting little bites of information. Maybe you're not getting all this information at once, but if I'm asked 1 or 2 questions that I can quickly respond to, I may be more apt to share.
Right. Yeah. Love it.
You know what that makes me think of, though, is great places to work, employer of choice. I mean, just all of this stuff, the Baldrige Award, right? All of this stuff that's out there. And how leaders, come on, team, we've got to fill this out.
Yeah.
But we, doggone it, we're going to be an employer of choice. Now get to it, which is just the opposite, right? Because it's going to be the relationships that carry a whole lot more influence than that pizza party for 85% participation rate, right? Oh yeah, and if people are struggling to fill out these surveys, just the spirit of inquiry, like there's a reason that it's not happening.
Yes.
I've got to find out what the reason is, right? To adjust or to pivot or whatever the thing I need to do is. That commitment is still real. I'm committed to building better relationships with my team. Right, doggone it, I'm committed to being a leader and not just a department head. There's an element of accountability, like self-accountability, that usually we'll put on other people and hold them accountable, but not as much as we hold ourselves accountable, which I think really is at the heart of the workforce crisis. It is that inclusion, it is that belonging. I can get this at home with less money. I'll take, I'll take the love and adoration somewhere else. You keep your money. Yeah, I honestly think that the heart of the matter is first it starts with me, and then being a lightning rod and being able to hold other people to what is it that we're here for, not for the residents. Yes, we're always here for the residents, but what are we doing for humanity in our workspace?
Yeah.
And that just feels like a major shift. But workforce crisis, what a big wake-up call that is. There couldn't be a louder alarm clock.
Yeah, you'd be, well, you wouldn't be surprised. You'd be saddened by how often when we measure culture in organizations in the current culture, how often blame and bullying come up. Sometimes retaliation, unconscious bias, but blame and bullying are the ones we see very often. And to your point, it's not only just the work we're doing in our whatever service we're providing in our organization, but also for greater humanity. Like I always say, people, if you work on this stuff, like for example, that you learn in Fully Staffed, you make yourself a better you take that home to your kids, your friends, your family, you take it to the people you serve at work, people getting services, as well as your staff that you serve, and you get to take it to the Piggly Wiggly too, and out in the world, at the, I don't know Piggly Wiggly here, the Cuban coffee shop down the block, right? Like we get to take it to all those places. And so I'd say no pressure, but you really are creating a better world when we do this work. Yeah. Brianna, how about you? Thoughts on sort of best practices around inclusion? And then I'm going to ask the group for some questions. So get ready to get by your keyboards.
I was going to say, I really do agree with Kirsten about really finding out what your organization needs before you do anything. There's just so much information about like what's the right thing to do and what doesn't work, but there's just not a one size fits all with how to start this journey. But I think it should really start with really understanding, what is the culture like and within your organization, inviting people to share, and then using that information to move forward. I think that's huge.
Yeah, the data piece.
Mm-hmm.
I always say to people, it's like, it's funny, we when you ask about culture, people will say, we have a great culture. And I'll say, how do you know? And they say, I could feel it in my gut. And I often say, do you feel your finances in your gut? Do you feel your financial statements in your gut? Do you feel your occupancy statements in your gut? Right? You're using data, and why should this be any different? Yeah. So let's ask our friends that are joined us live, Sandy, Lisa, Ellen, questions or anything to add to the conversation. And you can take yourself off mute, or if you'd rather, you can throw it in the chat, whichever works for you. But I'd love to know any thoughts that you have or questions you might have. I'll give you a moment.
I'm just enjoying the conversation. This is great. It's a lot of great information.
Thanks, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa, I'd be curious to hear what prompted you to join this particular call?
Gosh, I feel weird not being on camera. I think this is something that my managers really need to embrace. I don't know that we're there yet. We have a very, large Hispanic community that works for us. And I think that they don't understand a lot of where they came from and some of the struggles that they've had, and that, I hear stories from my staff about, some of the struggles they had growing up. They didn't have a great role model, things like this. And I think that, like you said, understanding where they're coming from, understanding, their struggles, in their culture and in their generation, is really important. And I'm always trying to learn more about that.
Gotcha.
Lisa,
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead,
oh,
Chris.
please. I think about like what immediately came to mind, Lisa, was that so accent sometimes throws people off. I'm just thinking about all of the little bits that then ultimately, holy crap, this is way too big for me to deal with. We can't say Merry Christmas anymore. What is the world coming to, right? And just all of the things. But what made me think like immediately is in just one-on-ones situations, if I'm thinking, okay, do I have the same openness or attitude or demeanor as I would with somebody that I care about or one of my favorites team members, right? I mean, that's a me thing. That has nothing to do with whoever is in front of me. It's that self-examination. And helping folk, whether, Lisa, you can coach it or even just asking that question, because it just brings down the level of don't know. It brings down that level, right?
Yeah.
When I have a mirror in front of me and I say, oh, let me check myself first before, because whatever I do will have impact on that other person, right? I mean, yeah.
And like we've had a manager that kind of struggled with getting to know that, because they came from such a different place of like, of not having that struggle, of not having that and not understanding. I mean, to be blunt, white privilege was very real in their life, and trying to get them to understand that there is, a whole other aspect that you're not picking up on.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me. As you were talking, Lisa, you remind me, I had a conversation. My mother will never hear this, thankfully. So I'll share with you my dirty family secret. Not really, but it was an interesting conversation with my mother. And I was talking about just this sense of, we had so many, she was basically saying like, we earned everything that we've gotten in life. And I said, but you also had a lot of privilege in life. Just even starting the country you were born in, like that's a privilege. Just being born in the US is a privilege. And she's like, no, you're saying your dad didn't work hard. I'm like, I'm not saying that at all. He was a New York City firefighter who worked very hard. Pictures back there on the wall. But she said to me, like, we bought a house, worked hard to have that house when we were young. And I said, how did you come about to get your house? And she said, well, your grandfather worked for the builder and they had one house to get rid of. And so then I said, Mom, that right there, the fact that they had one house to get rid of, that was like when interest rates were like 18% or something. And I said, that right there is like a little leg up that somebody else didn't have. And so I think it's sometimes hard when we're so close to, like, she couldn't see it, and I don't think it ever hit her still, that privilege piece. But to me, I didn't even know that story. And when I heard that, I'm like, that just sort of to me reinforces that little bit, or not little bit, big privilege that they had, that somebody else, they might still have been living in an apartment had they not had her father not work for that builder and so forth. But to your point, Lisa, I think it's so interesting that it's harder for some people to see that. Any other comments, thoughts about that?
Take people to lunch, for crying out loud. How about without an agenda? How about that? Right? Just go. Right? Coffee's on me today. Right? You have 10 minutes. I don't know much about you. Right? I'm just thinking of, there's one of the things is that I find in just having conversations about all the like the definitions. So, you know, privilege. What are you talking about? Right? Says Denise's mother. Right? And that's not a like a singular perspective, right? Right? There's several words that just are triggers.
Yes.
That holy crap, oh, we're going down that. Just go to coffee. Would you chill? Just go to
Yeah.
coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Build a better relationship so that conversations are easier, conflict is easier. And when the humanities stuff is managed, then a lot of the scariness of dear Lord inclusion, diversity, oh crap, equity, what? Now there's belonging to the breathe. Can we just breathe? What do you know about this human being? What are the baselines? How about family? Right? I mean, just that inquiry. So could you imagine mandating across the organization that, hey, spend next supervision, spend 15 minutes on the human being rather than the task? All this task orientation has led to a workforce crisis. There's more task than relationship.
Yeah.
But we're learning. We're learning.
And to Kirsten's point earlier, it's sort of, Chris, what you're saying, it feeds in even to that culture change piece, right? Of even knowing the individual people that we're serving. Because, you know, I just always think about, you know, I was a nursing assistant, I was an administrator for years. And it's sort of when you learn something about that person as a person, it was this whole new light that you would see this person through. My gosh, they achieved that in their life, or my gosh, they raised whatever 8 kids or whatever, right? But you would see this person in a whole new light, which also moves you out of task, even for the service side. So it's like treating our staff like that, so that they in turn help the people that we serve and support to be seen as individuals and treated differently. Thoughts are
So how about we all get shadow boxes? Right. Right. Yeah. Oh, everybody gets a shadow box.
what's important to me. Yes. Yes. I love it. I love it. What's something surprising that people might not know about inclusion? Is there anything surprising that you think people might not know?
One thing that shows up for me is just this idea that focusing on diversity without focusing on inclusion can cause harm, both individually and organizationally. So we can't have one without the other. That's why that acronym gets slurred together so often. I think there are, these are individual concepts, but if we focus on who's missing or how do we not have representation within this organization, whether it's the board, whether it's team members, whatever it is, and then we don't think about whether or not they're going to feel a sense of inclusion when they arrive, we're creating a bunch of problems on a bunch of levels. So that feels important. And maybe not surprising, but maybe surprising. I don't know.
I think that's very surprising. And I'm going to back up for a second, because I just want to make sure people are, and I want to make sure that I'm representing yours correctly, but I think it's so important you said that. Diversity, I can invite every single whatever different type of person that we have in all different ways to a meeting or to a committee to share their opinion. That is diversity. But if they don't feel a sense of inclusion, and to Brianna's point way earlier, this sense of I have something to contribute and my words are important to contribute as is, that diversity really could do more harm than good.
We work, sometimes we partner with Ayana King, who's also a DEI practitioner, and she says, what good is it to invite me to the table if you aren't going to pass me the plate? And to me, that is the diversity without inclusion piece.
I love it. I love it. Ayana was actually our guest a few months back And I think it actually was diversity was her topic of that month. And I just learned so much from her. She's fabulous. Anything else surprising, Brianna or anybody else, in the group that wants to share that leaders might not know about inclusion? Kirsten, that was really good. Thank you for calling that out.
I think inclusion doesn't have to be that hard. Like it can just start from a simple question that you ask. I remember hearing from a member whose staff, they post jobs within the organization, and some staff may not see the job posting because maybe they're more front facing and they don't have an opportunity to get online. And now because they heard feedback from a staff member that they don't feel included in the jobs that go out, they're making sure that these people have time during their day to actually go on to the portal and apply and look at what jobs are available. So just something as simple as asking what people need and what they want can foster inclusion.
Oh, I love that. And it's even, I love that you said that the job postings, it makes me think of recognition, right? Sometimes people say whoever got the most votes was employee of the month, which I hate employee of the month. But, if I'm in the back end of the house, what opportunity, like if I'm in billing, nobody's probably writing me a lot of love letters, right? Sending me that bill. So that's really important, or a certain shift even,
Right.
I think about one time I was with a client and it was early morning and I was waiting outside of the HR office for the person to come in that I was meeting with. And there was somebody from the night shift, this guy that was sitting next to me. And he said, "Oh, look, my name's up there there was like a big TV celebrating all the people for that month." And I said, "Oh, there." And he's like, "I don't know." And I know this group, they have like all these committee meetings to decide who, and there's all this, rigmarole about, how to choose people. And then to your point, at the end of the day, right, is now maybe if I worked day shift, I would have known why my name was up there, but because he was on nights, he had no clue even about that recognition. So even the good stuff we're doing, we have to think about inclusion in that. Yeah. Great point, Brianna. So tell me a little bit about I'm going to skip to that last question because I think this is an important one. People are unbelievably busy these days, right? So much going on in their worlds, constantly trying to fill positions and recruit and so forth. I want to call Lisa out though. Lisa increased her number of applicants, 12 January last year. What did you have? 200 this year, Lisa, in January. So I want to call her out that there are good things happening. But people are so busy. What's one simple thing that they can do to support this culture of inclusion? If you had to recommend one thing that somebody can do to support a culture of inclusion, and Brianna, you're first up on my screen. If you have a thought, I'd love to know what it is.
What first comes to mind is just simply taking the time to listen. And I think Chris alluded to this earlier, just, let's go for a walk for 10 minutes or let's grab coffee and I want to hear about you. What are some of your concerns or something that's coming up for you? Just taking the time to listen. It can just start there.
Yeah. Listening with an open heart, open mind to everybody. Great. Kirsten or Chris?
Oh, it's so hard to narrow to one, but I love yours, Brianna. I would add perhaps a mind shift could be helpful if we think about inclusion as part of the work rather than added work. If we know that retention is so closely tied to people feeling a sense of belonging, then, and we know if people feel a sense of belonging, services and supports are better. We know all these things. So maybe shifting our mindset to really thinking about this as not a nice to have or something additional to add to the list, but really what we're doing and how we do it well.
Yeah, it makes me think of in the recording for this month, I shared this quote from, once again, I don't know who. I'm good at remembering quotes, but just not who. At least I don't take credit for them. But saying that, like, the revolving doors that people go through, or the automatic doors that open, it's I don't have to open a door and it serves everybody, doesn't it? Or the ramps even, right? Like ramps serve a lot of people. Like I use them all the time. My little dog with his little legs that are this big, and that sense of inclusion is, it's not something separate for us to do, but how do we just think about not maybe the physical design too, but not necessarily physical design, but this overall culture design of, it's just how we go about our work with this sense of people really feeling I belong here, no matter who they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah. So inclusion leads to belonging, even no matter how you slice it, right? So if it's the right thing to do, blah, blah, blah. If that doesn't kind of guide the action, if we don't get better at inclusion, we can't end the workforce crisis. So even just thinking about HR issues and finding people and sourcing people and then building the classes so we have more CNAs, that to me seems daunting. How about we hold on to the people that we currently have?
Yes, yes.
So if they don't feel included, right, the issue continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So if I have the analytical head, holy crap, now I got to be kind to people. Right? Okay. Oh, cool. If that's going to make sure that the residents get taken care of, imagine that. The slower I am at adopting kindness, the bigger the issue is, the faster it continues to roll. If I don't know who is currently circulating their resume in my department or in my organization, I don't, it's, yeah, I want to know stuff in my department. And the best way to do that is to build relationships so that there are no surprises. How about that? So if I'm surprise adverse, I start building the relationships so that folks are less likely to, like, wait, where did Kenny go? Yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, none of this is a surprise.
Yeah.
So how about we prepare in the way we benchmark everything else? How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking too, Chris, the more that we get to know people and get to know all sorts of people, also the opportunity for us to then think that person, like sometimes we'll say like, oh, well, I mean, whatever, like, oh, she's a single mother. She won't be able to put the hours in, or she'll be, late to work all the time. Right. But the more I get to know people and I sit down and I'm having coffee with someone who's a single mom and she's telling me about her life, I can understand that. And then it makes me, for the next person, think, you know what, that person's a great employee, instead of this separateness of putting people in the categories of, that's not going to work out. You're getting to know that person, but it also, I feel like in some ways opens you up to being more open even for others.
Yeah, because even as you say that, Denise, I think about, guess what if it's not team members? I mean, there are folk in leadership that don't feel that sense of inclusion, right?
100%.
Right. So if I develop my radar, if I develop my openness, if I develop my, my people skills, they're developed for everybody.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, just in thinking about leading age, and now there is a network for folk of color, and there didn't used to be, right? And the conference goers are usually at this level somewhere. Yeah, so it really does, it transcends, it's a people thing. It's not even a division thing or a level thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think even for people to understand the importance of that, because, sometimes people say like, aren't we creating more separateness in the world? And people do it, like, I have a women's retreat, and people even say it for that, right? It's, well, you're creating more separateness. And I like think of it because there are things that a group of women deal with, so things that group of people of color deal with, that others can't understand, and that it's helpful together. Like I know the women perspective. I had a group recently, and I said, like, I'm not sure men think about what they wear, and not in the sense of does this look nice, but in the sense of is someone going to think something wrong of me if I wear something. And I'm totally heightened to it because something I wore like a year ago, someone made a comment about, and it's like just stuck with me now. Every time I get ready to do a conference and present, I'm like, and it's just, and so anyway, so I think about like, that sense of if that is in your mindset right now, why are we creating more separate than togetherness? I think some of this is this support of people that are like me to understand what have gone through the same experiences is important. And if you're not in one of whatever group, sometimes that's hard to understand. But to think about it from that perspective, that you can't even imagine sometimes what people are dealing with. I just saw today, the person that took my photographs for my website, her name is Damali Shepherd, and she posted this on social media, so public, and I just love and adore her. But she posted something and said, I apply for jobs with Damali Shepherd, and then I apply for jobs as Abigail Shepherd, and the same resume, and the organizations, I would get a no to Damali, and I would get a call back with the name Abigail. Same damn resume. And my name's Denise, so it's pretty sadly generic, and apologize to all you Denises out there, but it is. And so I never even thought about that before. Like it never even dawned on me. Or might I have done that like in my life when I looked at resumes and not even realized it and so forth. And I guess just the sense of we cannot even sometimes understand what that might be like. And so instead of fighting this separateness, thinking about why people need that support.
Yeah.
Closing comments, thoughts, questions.
I'm thinking there's a whole lot of star power on this. I'm glad that we're on the task. How about that?
Yeah.
How about that? I mean, I think I'm eternally optimistic, and also recognize that I'm not the only one that's fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
And for a win-win, like as I've, the fight, it's not a win-lose. It's a win-win.
Yes.
No matter who it is that I'm engaging. Yeah, and I'm just grateful to be with on this squad. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I just posted on social media right before this call, getting ready for this call, saying, there was research that Forbes did that said when someone makes an individual decision compared to a decision that a group of very diverse people, that it's they make 87% of the time they make a better decision, that very diverse group of people, than an individual. And that's like, it's an insane number, 7%. So to your point, Chris, it's like there's no lose in it. It's supportive of people, and it's supportive of the organization, and it's supportive of the leaders, certainly when we're making better decisions. Awesome. Well, you all are a gift to me and to our field, and I thank you so much for offering your nuggets of wisdom that are going to help so many people as they watch this, and then ripple that out to their team and the people that they serve. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time.
Thank you.
Oh, grateful for the opportunity.
And thank you all for listening to this, whether you're live or recorded. I appreciate you. And I hope there are things that you picked up from today that you can put into practice immediately in your organizations. Thanks, everybody.